You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Hristodoulou.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today, as we do every Thursday, we're beginning our predictions and picks for week number 7 of the USFL, a pivotal week in how I believe the playoff race is going to shake out, with some big games here that are going to decide a lot of things during the final few weeks of the regular season. We're getting pretty close to season's end now. Week 7, remember, it's only a 10-week season, so you only got, 2-3 more weeks after this one here. We are on the back 9 and getting close to playoff time here. But remember, as always, I'm just doing Saturday's games today. I will do Sunday's games tomorrow, so make sure you tune in tomorrow as well. You don't miss the second half of this week's picks. I am currently sitting at 14-10 right now, so we're above 500, and that's about as happy as I can be about that right now, given the last few weeks. We've gone 2-2. I've had a couple of 1-3 weeks here or there, or I think only one, something like that. But it's been a pretty wild back half of the season so far, with upsets all over the place and just some surprising wins here or there. But there's a lot to get into, a lot to talk about. Make sure you comment down below. Let me know, who do you think comes out winners in week number 7? But let's dive right in, shall we? Beginning with the Birmingham Stallions taking on the New Orleans Breakers. This one's at 4 p.m. Eastern time on Fox at Protective Stadium in Birmingham, Alabama. You have the Stallions coming in. Defense is looking pretty good. They have been struggling against the run for the most part during the season, but overall, a solid effort by them, dealing with as many injuries as they have through the entirety of the season at this point. And you also have Alex McGough playing at an MVP level. Then you have the Breakers coming into this game, back-to-back games with only 10 points scored offensively, and really, they have not looked very good offensively for even the last 3 weeks. Yes, they're coming off a 2-game losing streak, but I mean, you could look back as far as their game against the Generals about 3 weeks ago and really see where the offense has kind of tapered off at this point, and I'm a little bit concerned about them. Offensively right now, there for the Breakers, there's just a very big question mark surrounding McLeod Bethel-Thompson, and a lot of people are starting to ask, is fatigue maybe starting to settle in, having played through the CFL season all the way up to the championship in late November last year, and only getting a few months of turnaround time before he suits up, gets himself into training camp, and gets things rolling for the Breakers just, roughly 4 months-ish or so later. So I could see where there's a lot of concern regarding maybe fatigue settling in, but he has 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions the last couple of weeks. He has got to get that right if the Breakers want to be able to secure themselves a leading spot for the playoffs. With this game against the Stallions, both teams are 4-2. This one right here could be a massive difference maker as to who is that number 2 team, or maybe 1 team, depending on what happens with the Gamblers in the South Division come playoff time. The offensive line is looking a little bit worrisome to me too. I think that's something that's definitely worth bringing up here and something that needs to get right in this game here. I feel like they're not playing with quite the nastiness they were the first 3 weeks of the season, and even for a bit during that 4th game against the Gamblers, but the offense has really taken a step back, and I think some of it starts with the offensive line struggling a bit more to protect McLeod Bethel-Thompson. They really have not been as dominant in the run game either, so definitely some things that need to improve going into this matchup against a division rival in the Stallions. I think if they want to come away victorious in this game, you want to get back to doing what was working for you really, really well during the first 3-4 weeks of the season, and that was dominating with running back Wes Hills. The first time these two teams played, Breakers finished the game with about 200 yards rushing. They're averaging 5.3 yards a carry. They had 3 touchdowns. Wes Hills had 191 of those yards. It was an absolute dominating performance in the air and on the ground. But if you want to take it to this Stallions team, their defense has struggled more so against the run than anything. I would say try your absolute best. Get that offensive line fired up. Open up some running lanes for Wes Hills, and let's get back to a very well-balanced and successful offense. And on top of that, with how good the Stallions offense is, they have got to control the clock in this game. And that was something they did a really good job of in week number 3 when they played the first time. They were able to keep the ball out of Alex McGough's hands. They had 36 minutes and 36 seconds of time of possession altogether to Birmingham's 23 minutes and 24 seconds. So keeping the ball out of Alex McGough's hands, who again has been playing at an MVP level, should be paramount for this offense. Control the clock, a well-balanced attack. Don't get too pass happy and shy away from the run if things don't work out initially. Again, the Stallions haven't been great against defending the run, so it is something you want to emphasize and just be aggressive about going into this game here. Looking at the defensive side of the ball, I think there's really just two things that you have to try to do in this game. First and foremost, I've already talked about it plenty, Alex Magoo, you have got to contain him and keep him inside the pocket. A lot of teams have struggled with that this year, and I think Alex Magoo does the majority of his damage when things start to break down and he gets himself outside the pocket, whether he decides to run with the football or he's making an impressive throw on the run. If you can't contain Alex Magoo, you are not going to be able to slow down this offense. He has masked a lot of deficiencies with the offense, especially in the running game. They haven't been super dominant on the ground this year compared to how they did last year in terms of rushing, but Alex Magoo has been a big reason as to why that hasn't been as big of a problem for them. So if you're not containing Alex Magoo, you are probably not winning this football game, especially considering the shape your offense has been in. The other thing here, and you're going to have to try to do your best to pick basically one or the other because it's going to take a Herculean type of effort from the defense to eliminate both. You need to decide on who you want to take out of this game, whether it's going to be tight end Jay Sternberger or wide receiver Davian Davis. Both guys are averaging 13.5 yards per reception so far this season, and like I said, it's going to take quite an effort to try to eliminate both of these guys. So pick your poison, basically. Figure out which one is probably going to do the least amount of damage. Look back to what happened to you during week 3 when you faced this team. Who had the most success, and maybe try to focus a little bit more on them this time around and see if that helps you out. But again, you came out victorious the first time around, but offense is not looking as good. You looked at 24 points allowed altogether defensively because obviously the Stallions were able to return a kickoff for a touchdown. So offense, then the 31 points that they had, a little overblown in terms of what the Stallions did offensively. But at the end of the day, pick one of those targets. They're the two main guys in terms of receiving on this offense here, and try to eliminate one of them as much as possible. As for the Stallions in this game here, I think one thing, and I've kind of touched on this a little bit here, that they need to do is get aggressive up front and establish the run. You only had 14 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown in week number 3, and I think controlling the clock and just moving the ball well on the ground was probably one of the things they struggled with the most. I pointed out the time of possession. There was a massive sway, 13 minutes in favor of the Breakers in that game here. So I think you need to focus on controlling the ball a little bit more, especially now that we're getting into like the really hot months of the summer, or getting close to it at that point. Games are getting hot that are being played in Birmingham, and this is one of those games where, I mean, depending on how hot it actually ends up being, I didn't check the weather here, so maybe I should have for this, but depending on how hot it's going to get in those games, controlling the ball and keeping the ball out of the Breakers' hands and just, a very steady, methodical pace on offense might benefit you here. On top of that, you have to figure out a way to get some points on the board in this game here. Remember, I mentioned 24 points offensively the first time these two teams played here. I know the Breakers have been struggling, but that was only for the last 3 weeks, you could say. 2 weeks, it's been really, really bad. You can't count on that to be the case. This is a team that had 105 points in the first 3 weeks of the season. You have to account for that, and you have to remember what they did to you on the they did offensively to your defense during that first matchup. You can't just count on them, continuing with their struggles and maybe not being able to put up points again. Don't bet on that. Make sure your offense is humming. And again, it's probably going to have to go through Alex Magoo. He has been an absolute stud. And for him to come out and have one of his best games of the season would be massive for this team this week. As for the defensive side of the ball, like I've talked about, you're catching New Orleans in a slump. You want to take advantage of this game. I mentioned some of the issues with the offensive line right now. I feel like they're just not quite as nasty as they were the first few weeks there. It's something that is definitely easily correctable, but something that I feel like, I don't know if it's like complacency or they just felt like, we're so much better than the teams we're playing right now, and maybe they've eased up on the gas pedal. I don't know what the answer is, just kind of speculating here, but you have an opportunity. Take advantage of it. New Orleans has allowed 6 sacks in their last 2 games, so guys like Dondrea Tillman, Willie Henry, Rashad Smith, they all have a couple of sacks this season. This would be a game for those guys to get in there, bring the pressure, bring McLeod Bethel-Thompson down, and continue to cause headaches for an offense that has been otherwise fairly ineffective the last few weeks. On top of that, Wes Hills has got to be a priority here. I know he hasn't been quite as dominant the last 3 weeks as he was the first 3 weeks or so. However, the first time that you two met, he had 34 carries for 191 yards and 3 touchdowns. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry here. Yes, he's slowed down, but your run defense has not necessarily been the best all season long. You rank 7th in the league, allowing about 129 yards per game. if there is anything you need to be careful for, it is Wes Hills. Do not let him have his get-right game against you guys and go off for another 30 touches and another near 200 yards and a handful of scores. He has got to be priority number one. You did a good job handling everything else for the most part the first time you guys met. Yes, McLeod Bethel-Thompson had nearly 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns, but a lot of that had to do with just your defense is over here conflicted, trying to respect the running game that's been thrashing you all game versus, the passing game is just so wide open because you have to stack the box at that point. So it's one of those things where if you can eliminate Wes Hills, defensively, you've been a pretty good team for the most part. I just feel like that game kind of got out of hand with trying to respect one side of the offense or the other. You didn't really know what was coming at you. If you can eliminate Wes Hills and keep him to the more lesser numbers, I guess you could say, compared to his production so far overall this season, which are still pretty solid. If you can at least keep him more in a modest, carry count and yardage number, keeping him sub 100 or so, I think things will be a little bit easier for you in terms of defending the pass, and you'll have a better game overall defensively. As for who I think is going to come out victorious in this game here, this is a hard one for me because I'm a Breakers fan. Go Blue Wave and all that. Want to see the Breakers succeed, but I am really concerned about what I've seen from this team offensively these last 3 weeks here. I can't really ignore it, especially the last 2. It started to get ugly during the Generals game, but it's really reared its ugly head the last couple of weeks. And I can't just ignore the fact that you only have 20 points put on the board in the last 2 weeks. On top of that, again, offensive line concerns are there, and Alex Magoo's playing really, really well right now. Defensively, Stallions, they've been a solid team at worst and one of the better teams at best. And I just don't know if the Breakers have given me enough the last few weeks to count on them being victorious. And with that in mind, for the second time this season, and I was wrong the first time, and the Breakers fan in me hopes I'm wrong the second time, I'm going to go with the Breakers taking the victory. Excuse me, not the Breakers. Wow, see, Breakers fan talking. I'm going to go with the Stallions here for the victory, and I have them winning a tighter contest, 27-21. I think that the Breakers are going to find a little more offensive success. Hopefully this is like a get-right game for their offense here, but ultimately I think some of their problems still prevail, and you're going up against a really good Stallions team right now that kind of feels like since their loss to the Gamblers is kind of on a roll here, and even in that loss, it was a very hot game. Things were testy. They were kind of shooting themselves in the foot, but if they keep their heads on right, this is a Stallions team that can throw haymakers with anybody in this league, and I have a feeling the Stallions come out with the victory and they split the series 1-1 with the Breakers this season. So give me the Stallions, 27-21, tight contest. I'm thinking something along the lines of maybe you're scoring on the last, the final drive of the game, something close to that, final seconds, and the Breakers maybe get a few shots of some Hail Marys and ultimately come up short, but it's going to be a tight one, I think, in Birmingham this week, and it's going to be a good one, but I have a feeling the Stallions more than anything. I feel like the first time I picked this game out, it was me trying to not be a Breakers fan and pick the team that I wanted to win that game. And while maybe some of that is going on again here, I just feel more confident at this point in the season, and especially from the last couple of weeks from what I've seen on the Stallions as compared to what I've seen from the Breakers. The second game we're looking at here for Saturday is going to be the Philadelphia Stars taking on the Pittsburgh Maulers. This is a late game here. We're looking at 9 p.m. Eastern time at Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton, Ohio. You can catch this game on FS1. The Stars are coming in, leaders of the North. I don't think something anyone thought they'd be saying if you even looked at the Stars 2 weeks ago. But here they are, 2-game winning streak. You have a Maulers offense that came to I don't even know if a screeching halt is a loud enough explanation as to what we've seen from them, but it was quite a disaster for them offensively last week. 3 interceptions between both their quarterbacks. It was not a good week for the Maulers. Getting shut out, the first shutout of season 2. It was not a pretty one. Defensively, they're looking all right. Still, they're doing their thing, but that was an awful game to watch from the offensive perspective of the Maulers. Now, going into this game here, we'll preview the Stars a little bit here and kind of go over some stuff. Offensively, the first thing that comes to mind going into this game here is you have got to find a way to finish drives, and it feels like maybe you're starting to get there in doing so. However, when you look at the numbers, this is since week 2. This has been a problem all season long. 16 of your 20 scoring drives have ended in a field goal. 16 of your 20 scoring drives field goals. That's since week 2, since pretty much we got things rolling. Week 1, offense looked pretty good. The O-line struggled a bit, but they were able to get into the end zone. They were doing a good job moving the football. And since then, they just have a hard time finishing things off. Running back Matt Colburn, though, I firmly believe is the answer to some of their offensive woes. And we saw that last week with his 15 touches for 75 yards. I really feel like this offense in Philadelphia is a much better unit when Matt Colburn is getting the ball in his hands. And I think the Stars really need to continue doing that. I don't think it's a coincidence that his numbers were down the last couple of weeks prior to last week's game. And once he starts seeing the football some more, you scheme up some plays, you're getting him involved in the passing game, which is something that I think he needs more of as well. He's really good catching the ball in the backfield. He's good when it comes to lining up behind the quarterback and, running the football. But we need to see more of Matt Colburn. I firmly believe he is one of the more talented running backs in the league, and if he's getting the football, this offense just feels like it flows a lot better. So open things up with Matt Colburn and scheme up some more money plays for wide receiver Corey Coleman. He has been one of the better wide receivers in the league. The Maulers have one of the best pass defenses in the USFL right now, so you're going to need to rely on your best wide receiver to come up with some big plays. So scheme up some plays for Corey Coleman. Keep getting him involved. This is another one of those things similar to like Matt Colburn. I feel like this offense is better when you're trying to drive it through Matt Colburn and Corey Coleman in the passing game. So focus on getting the ball to your two playmakers there, and I think your team's going to be a lot better off. And we're starting to see some of the improvements. Again, last week was a good step in the right direction. Keep feeding the ball to your playmakers. They were able to do so last week. It resulted in a big victory for them. Let's keep that going. On the defensive side of the ball, two things that I have in mind. The first thing being you have got to win up front. The Maulers offense, like I said, crashed and burned last week, and a large part of that had to do with just the offensive line play. It's been an issue all season long, and if you want to win this game, you need to continue to just beat down on a Maulers offensive line that has not really held up its end of the bargain on the offense. They've been struggling to run the football with their running backs. The majority of their rushing yards has been coming from Troy Williams, and we saw last week, and if you can just stay disciplined and stick to your assignments as a defense, you have a legitimate shot of shutting down what the Maulers are doing, because the Showboats last week, you saw it. The Maulers offense is it's a very tricky, trying to play mind games with you type of deal. There's, motions, RPOs, like read options, things like that. You're seeing a lot of different things from the Maulers. Their playbook offensively is very exotic and wild, but it needs to be because it masks some of the deficiencies that they have. But the Showboats, they were very good at just kind of sticking to their assignments, being very disciplined, making sure you know where the ball is going at all times, and they were sniffing out a lot of those trick plays. And when those weren't working, they tried to default to just regular, plays out of the shotgun or just some, things under center, whatever it may have been, and it was not working because, again, the O-line of Pittsburgh is not great. They've struggled all season long, and once the Showboats were like, yeah, you're not going to get us today with, all these cutesy things you've been drawing up, the Maulers offense collapsed, and I can't say I'm too surprised. I was anticipating at some point they might have gotten caught up with what they were doing. I didn't expect it to happen so soon because they haven't really been doing it for a ton of time, but it's a little bit concerning just how bad things got for them last week. And if you can do the same thing the Showboats did, just sniff out those trick plays, again, stay disciplined, attack that offensive line that has struggled, you have a really good shot of winning this game if you're the Philadelphia Stars. As for the Maulers, their offense, like I said, mess offensively last week. You had 3 interceptions, 2 from James Morgan. You had 1 from Troy Williams last week. If there was ever a get-right game, which you've basically been waiting on all season long, I already mentioned it, they have been struggling to run the football with their running backs here. And I like Madre London. I think he's a very talented running back, and I think that you're just not getting the help up front that you need for things to open up for him. If there was ever a get-right game for your running back room, this is the game. The Stars allow about 139 yards per game on the ground, which is the most in the league. They have allowed 8 touchdowns, which is tied for second. On top of that, 5.2 yards per carry is the most per average in the league, I believe by 0.2 or 0.3 yards, and they have allowed 49 first downs to the running game. So if there was ever a game for the Stars to get, the Maulers to get things going, this is the game. The Stars have an awful time trying to defend the run, and this would be your opportunity to maybe get something going offensively on the ground. The other thing I'd like to see this offense do is try to get the tight ends just involved a little bit more. I feel like you rely very heavily on your wide receivers over there in Philadelphia, and when you look at the target count here and just how uninvolved these tight, like I feel like you have tight ends on the roster, and it's kind of like, for what at this point? You have only targeted your tight ends 13 times out of the 161 total targets that are spread out through your entire receiving room. What do you have tight ends for? Try to scheme up some plays, help the big guys over the middle, scheme some stuff up, try to get them open, create some mismatches. Maybe it's just the tight end room and their inability to create separation, things like that. Or maybe you just don't have the looks that you're not scheming things up for them. You're not designing plays specifically around your tight ends. Try to open up the passing game a little bit with your tight ends some more. I feel like it's either going to go to like Bailey Gaither or Henny. So try to open things up for your tight ends a little bit more. Get them more involved. How do you have only 13 targets to your tight end, and we're going into week number 7 now? I just feel like you're completely forgetting about a significant portion of your passing game. You have players on your team that are just there, like collecting dust on the bench, not doing anything, or they're lining up and all they're doing is blocking. Try to get something going for that tight end room. As for the defensive side of the ball, I think the Stars definitely want to focus on bringing the pressure here. Like I said, the Maulers' offensive line has been awful throughout the entirety of the season, and they're one of the weaker pass-blocking O-lines in the league. So if you're bringing the pressure, you're doing things right. The Stars have been able to find success getting after the quarterback as of late. So if you're bringing the pressure, I think you'll have a very good opportunity to get after the quarterback, whether it's Troy Williams or if they try to go with James Morgan. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen with the quarterback spot this weekend, but if you can bring the pressure, I think you're going to be able to get to the quarterback. So focus on doing that. Locking up Matt Colburn, like I said, I think he is one of the biggest key pieces to the Stars offense. He does this season. I feel like he has not seen the amount of he's not getting the ball enough. He's not being targeted enough. I don't think he's getting enough attention thrown his way by his own offense. And if you can lock up Matt Colburn, I think you kind of lock up this Stars offense. When he's getting the ball, the Stars move the ball a lot more effectively. So if you can take him out of the game, I think you put yourselves in a really good spot. Corey Coleman's obviously a really important key piece there, but we've seen him have really good games, but we've also seen that the Stars offense will just kind of sputter out and not really have anything go for them, or they result in just having to kick hundreds of field goals in a game to win, despite what despite what Corey Coleman is doing. So if you can lock up Matt Colburn, I think you handicap the Stars offense a lot, and it puts you in a really good position in this game, especially with your offense kind of in like a scary spot right now where everyone's kind of like, what just happened with that shutout last week? Shutting down Matt Colburn puts you in a spot where you maybe don't need to score as much to win this game. And then the last thing, play stiff and win on third down. You got to keep the Stars outside that 40-yard line. You've been one of the better third down teams in the league. You're only allowing conversions on 37.7% of attempts. The Stars are only converting at 40.5% on third down, so they're not necessarily the best when it comes to those third down conversions. If you can just keep getting the Stars off the field and keep them outside of the 40, Luis Aguilar is one of the best kickers in the USFL, if not the best kicker in the USFL right now. He is as hot as anyone when it comes to kicking that football. You got to keep them outside the 40 because that is kind of like the bread and butter of the Stars right now. Doesn't matter where they are. If they're in field goal range, they're probably going to get 3, and the last thing you want is to lose to a team that's kicking 8 field goals. I'm not to say that that's a bad way to lose or anything, but if you're holding a team to 8 field goals and you're not able to win, your offense is clearly struggling. Overall, though, as for who I think ends up winning this game here, this is one of those games that I think might end up being a little bit of a lower scoring affair. I feel like the Stars offense is running into quite a monster in a Maulers defense that has been really good for the entirety of the season here. If there's one thing that's been consistent about the Maulers, it has just been that this defense week in and week out is going to put the clamps on offenses here, and they're going to make you really have to fight to win games. Whereas the Stars, offensively, they've been kind of a mixed bag. Sometimes they're moving the ball, they're just not getting into the end zone, so it just kind of depends on what we're going to see from them and how they fare against that defense. On the flip side of things, I feel like the Maulers are kind of in limbo right now. Last week was a disaster offensively, is probably the best way to put it, and I'm a little bit worried about them right now. I thought maybe they had things figured out. I was really excited about Troy Williams, but he throws his pick. James Morgan comes in. He has a couple of interceptions, and it kind of just felt like all hell broke loose on the offensive side of the ball. And I don't really know what to make of the Maulers offense right now. And their struggles in terms of running the football that isn't with Troy Williams is kind of concerning as well. So I think I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Stars for the victory in this game here. I think it ends up being a lower scoring affair, mainly because, again, Maulers defense is really good. Stars offense has struggled to get themselves into the end zone. Maulers probably not going to just put up a goose egg again in back-to-back weeks. That would be absolutely insane. So I do see them maybe finding the end zone once, getting a couple of field goals on the board, and that's where you get that 20-3 score line that I have picked out for this game. But I think this is going to be one of the quieter games that we watch this year, where we see just two teams kind of slogging it out, and there's going to be some ugly play. Defenses are probably going to shine a little bit more in this one here, but ultimately I like the Stars offense at least a little bit more, that I feel comfortable going with them over the Pittsburgh Maulers. So give me the Stars 20-13, and they continue their commanding hold of the North Division at this point in the season. But those are my picks for Saturday's games. Remember, Sunday's games coming out tomorrow, so make sure you tune in tomorrow for that as well. Comment down below. Let me know, who do you think wins on Saturday? Let me know who you think wins on Sunday if you're not going to be able to catch tomorrow's video. But that's it for me. I appreciate you if you made it all the way to the end of the video. I will see you all next time. Have a good one.